Who is the head of your family?
I am.
Step forward. A customer said they felt uncomfortable, and I support whatever they told me.
We haven't done anything wrong, and what do you mean? We're just shopping.
I will not repeat myself. Leave this place with your people.
The red light on the security camera blinks silently in the corner of the ceiling, a tiny mechanical eye that never sleeps and never lies, recording every single movement in high definition while unsuspecting people went about their daily lives below. Nobody pays attention to these cameras until it is too late, but this specific camera was about to capture a moment so shocking and so unfair that it would eventually cost the city millions of dollars and change the lives of everyone involved forever. It was the kind of footage that makes your heart beat faster because you can see the exact second where innocent peace is destroyed by hate. And you just know that nothing will ever be the same for the family standing in the produce aisle. Before we dive into this intense story, I want to know where my amazing viewers are joining from, so please drop your city or country in the comments right now. Felix was a man who loved the simple things in life. And on this bright afternoon, he was walking into the grocery store with his beautiful wife, Naya, and their energetic little son, Leo. They were a happy family who just wanted to buy fresh food for a nice dinner at home, and they held hands as they walked through the sliding glass doors that opened with a whoosh of cool air conditioning. The store was clean and bright with rows of colorful fruits and vegetables stacked high in crates, and the smell of fresh baked bread was drifting through the air from the bakery section in the back. Felix pushed the metal cart while Leo walked beside him, pointing at the red apples and green grapes with excitement because his father had promised him a sweet treat if he behaved well during the shopping trip. Everything felt perfect and normal, and there was absolutely no sign that a storm was about to crash down on their peaceful afternoon. They moved slowly through the aisles, picking out carrots and potatoes and a bag of rice, laughing quietly together about a joke Leo had made about a funny-looking squash. Other customers were walking around them, pushing their own carts and looking at their shopping lists, and for the first 20 minutes, nobody bothered them or even looked at them twice. Felix felt relaxed and safe, trusting that they were just another family in the neighborhood doing what everyone else was doing. However, standing near the front of the store with his arms crossed over his chest was a police officer named Miller, a man with a cold stare and a uniform that was pressed perfectly flat. Officer Miller was not shopping for food, but instead he was watching the customers with eyes that looked suspicious and angry, scanning the crowd as if he were looking for a problem that did not exist. His gaze landed on Felix and his family while they were inspecting a carton of milk in the dairy aisle, and his expression darkened for no reason other than the prejudice he held inside his heart. He watched them laugh and smile, and instead of seeing a loving family, he decided right then and there that they did not belong in this store. Without any warning, the officer pushed himself off the wall he was leaning against and began to walk heavily toward the back of the store where Felix was checking the expiration date on the milk. The sound of the officer's heavy black boots hitting the polished floor was loud and rhythmic, clumping closer and closer like a countdown to a disaster. Felix did not hear him coming at first because he was focused on his wife, who was asking him if they should get the low-fat milk or the regular kind. But then a large shadow fell over their shopping cart, blocking the bright fluorescent lights of the store, and the air around them suddenly felt very cold and heavy. Felix turned around slowly and saw the tall officer standing uncomfortably close to him, invading his personal space in a way that was meant to be intimidating and aggressive. The officer did not say hello or ask how they were doing, but instead he placed his thumbs in his heavy duty belt and stared down at Felix with a look of pure contempt. The silence stretched out for a few seconds, making Nia pull little Leo closer to her legs because she could sense the danger radiating from this man. The officer finally spoke, his voice loud enough for people in the next aisle to hear, and he asked a strange and demanding question. "Who is the head of your family?" Felix was confused by the question because it seemed to have nothing to do with buying milk, but he stood tall and looked the officer in the eye and answered clearly, "I am." The officer narrowed his eyes and took a step forward, forcing Felix to take a small step back to avoid bumping chests, and then the officer pointed a finger toward the front exit doors. He did not ask for identification or ask if they needed help, but instead he delivered a command that was based on nothing but lies. "I need you to step forward a bit." the officer said, guiding Felix away from his wife and child as if he were a criminal. When they were a few feet away from the cart, the officer lowered his voice to a menacing growl and said that another customer felt uncomfortable or complained, although he did not point to anyone specific or say what exactly had happened. He claimed that because of this mysterious complaint, the family had to leave the store immediately and could not finish their shopping. Felix looked around the store in shock, seeing that the other customers were just going about their business and nobody looked uncomfortable or upset. In fact, most people were not even paying attention to them until the officer started making a scene. He knew in his heart that nobody had complained and that this was just an excuse the officer was using to kick them out because of the color of their skin. A feeling of hot anger started to rise in Felix's chest, but he kept his voice calm and respectful because he knew that getting angry would only give the officer the excuse he wanted to use violence. "We haven't done anything wrong," Felix said firmly, refusing to move toward the exit. "We are just buying groceries like everyone else here, and we have a right to be here." The officer did not like this answer one bit, and his face turned red with anger because he was not used to people standing up to him when he gave an order. He placed his hand on the handle of his baton, a subtle threat that sent a wave of fear through Nia, who was watching from a few feet away with wide, terrified eyes. The officer stepped even closer, so close that Felix could smell the coffee on his breath, and he told Felix that if he did not leave right now, he would be arrested for trespassing and disturbing the peace. "Do you think it is fair for an officer to use his power like this without any real proof of a problem? Type yes or no in the comments." The tension in the aisle was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and finally a few other shoppers stopped their carts to watch what was happening. They saw a peaceful father standing his ground against a bully in a uniform, but nobody stepped in to help because they were all afraid of the officer's anger. Felix looked at his son Leo, who was starting to cry softly because he didn't understand why the bad man was yelling at his daddy. Seeing his son's tears made Felix stronger, and he planted his feet firmly on the ground and shook his head, refusing to be pushed around. "I am not leaving," Felix stated again, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet store. "Show me who complained, or leave us alone." The officer was furious now, and he unclipped the safety strap on his holster, preparing to escalate the situation to physical violence just because his ego was bruised. He began to shout at Felix, creating a loud disturbance that he then blamed on Felix shouting commands to get on the ground, even though Felix was just standing there peacefully. But what the officer did not realize was that the store owner, a kind and elderly man named Mr. Sterling, had been in his office at the back of the store watching the high-definition security monitors the entire time. Mr. Sterling had seen the family enter the store. He had seen them laughing and picking out vegetables. And most importantly, he had seen the officer approach them without any provocation whatsoever. Mr. Sterling was a man who believed in fairness and treating every customer like gold, and he had seen enough on the screen to know exactly what was happening in his aisle 4. The doors to the back office swung open with a bang, and Mr. Sterling marched out onto the floor, moving faster than anyone expected a man of his age to move. He was wearing a simple white shirt and a tie, but he carried an authority that was even stronger than the officer's badge. He walked straight past the frozen food section and right up to where the officer was threatening Felix. "Stop this immediately!" Mr. Sterling shouted, his voice booming through the store and silencing the officer instantly. The officer turned around, surprised to see the owner, and quickly tried to change the narrative to make himself look like the hero. "Sir, this man is causing a disturbance and making your customers uncomfortable." The officer lied, smoothly, pointing an accusing finger at Felix. "I am removing him for the safety of your store." Mr. Sterling did not even look at the officer. Instead, he looked at Felix and Nia and then down at little Leo, who was wiping tears from his face. He saw the fear in their eyes and the untouched groceries in their cart, and he knew the truth because he had the technology to prove it. He turned his gaze slowly to the officer, and his face was hard as stone. "I have been watching the cameras for the last 30 minutes, Mr. Sterling said in a voice that was low and dangerous. "This family has done absolutely nothing but shop for their dinner, and the only person causing a disturbance and making people uncomfortable in my store is you." The officer's face went pale as he realized that his lie had been caught, but he tried to double down, stammering that a customer had complained to him near the entrance. Mr. Sterling shook his head and pointed up at the black dome on the ceiling directly above them. That camera records audio and video in 4K resolution, Mr. Sterling revealed, his fingers shaking with anger. I heard every word you said, and I saw you standing by the door doing nothing until you decided to harass these good people. The other customers who were watching started to murmur and whisper, realizing that the officer was the villain in this story. The officer looked around nervously, seeing that he had lost control of the situation and that he was being exposed in front of everyone. Mr. Sterling took a step toward the officer, reclaiming his store from the man who was abusing his power. You are the one who needs to leave my store, Mr. Sterling demanded, pointing toward the exit doors with a trembling hand. Get out of here right now and do not ever come back to my property. The officer stood there for a moment, his hand still resting near his belt, trying to decide if he should fight or flee. He looked at Felix, who was still standing tall and dignified, and then he looked at Mr. Sterling, who was not backing down an inch. The shame of being kicked out by the store owner in front of a crowd was too much, and the officer finally took his hands off his belt, turned around stiffly, and began the long walk to the exit, while everyone watched in silence. Once the automatic doors closed behind the disgraced officer, the tension in the store broke like a popping balloon. Mr. Sterling turned to Felix and Nia and immediately apologized, taking Felix's hand in both of his own and shaking it warmly. He told them he was so sorry that this had happened in his establishment and that they were always welcome there. To make up for the terrible experience, he told them that their entire cart of groceries was free of charge today, and he insisted on giving Leo a giant chocolate bar from the candy shelf. But the story did not end there, because Felix knew that what had happened was illegal and wrong, and he could not just let it go. With the help of Mr. Sterling, who happily provided the full security camera footage, including the clear audio of the officer's lies and threats, Felix hired a lawyer to fight for his rights. The video was undeniable proof that the officer had targeted them solely based on prejudice and had fabricated the story about the complaint. The footage showed the peaceful shopping trip, the sudden aggressive approach of the officer, and the brave intervention of Mr. Sterling. It was played in a quiet room for the city officials and the police department heads, and nobody could say a single word to defend the officer's actions. The evidence was so clear and so damning that the city knew they would lose if they tried to fight it in a public trial. Because of the undeniable proof from the grocery store camera, the city agreed to a massive settlement to resolve the case. Felix and his family were awarded $2 million for the violation of their civil rights and the emotional distress they had suffered. The officer was fired from his job and faced his own consequences, ensuring that he could never treat another family that way again. Felix used the money to secure a bright future for his son Leo, ensuring that he would go to the best schools and have every opportunity in life. They continued to shop at Mr. Sterling's store every week, where they were always greeted with smiles and respect, proving that while hate may exist, there are also good people who will stand up for what is right. The red light on the camera continued to blink silently in the corner, but now it was a symbol of justice and truth, watching over the store to keep everyone safe.